1.7 million Philippine-born Filipinos living in the U.S. Marami po sa atin, hindi po dito talaga nanggaling. And so when we move from the Philippines to here, we always talk about and think about and worry about immigration. Kaya naman po, nandito ang American Dream to help us sort those out.
This American Dream segment is brought to you by Aquino & Lowe Law Firm, answering your immigration questions.
Attorney Richard Lowe joining us today on Kababayan LA. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you, too.
And for people that are migrating here from the Philippines, those who have to worry about their visa, the best gift, I think, is also, the chance to apply for naturalization. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, because there are cases and there are different approaches to these cases.
Yes, well, there's the straightforward cases where people have been here for 5 years and they've been a permanent resident for 5 years and they have no issues, no criminal history, nothing. And they can go ahead and apply for citizenship. They speak English, they know the history.
Okay, so you mentioned about that. No cases. Let's talk about this first case, because Joseph became a permanent resident in 2004. In 2005, while struggling to run a small business, Joseph bounced several checks to his suppliers. He was convicted under Code Section 476A and given a 16-month suspended sentence. So now, this guy has a case. Can Joe become a U.S. citizen?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. People don't really realize it, but in California, if you bounce a check, that's a crime of moral turpitude. And it could be potentially a deportable offense. So this question really raises, now, do you go and try to apply for naturalization? And what happens if you do? They could actually remove you based on this charge.
Oh, no.
But what they're trying to do now, this policy under prosecutorial discretion, this memo that came out in November, is they're trying to put these cases into a review panel and say, well, let's look at what the crime was. How long ago was it? What was this person's contribution to society since then? Have they gone to get an education? Have they become part of the military? And decide whether or not they want to put that person into proceedings.
So that's when they do the balancing act, and that's when you need a lawyer, because some people go through the naturalization process without a lawyer. What are the pitfalls to that? Well,
I think if you have a criminal conviction, you absolutely need an attorney. There's no reason why you should go through that process without an attorney, because, like I said, what appear innocuous charges can become problematic for you during naturalization.
Okay.
So the benefit here is that we're getting an ability to file naturalization and sort of get rid of that problem, become a U.S. citizen through the naturalization process without having to go into removal proceedings.
What are the other cases? DUI, it's holiday season, a lot of people are going to be drinking. Please don't drink and drive, but just in case. DUI, is that a deportable offense?
DUI, in and of itself, one DUI is not a deportable offense, but there are some jurisdictions that look to the number of DUIs. For example, if you have 2 or 3 DUIs, and if you've had your license suspended or revoked, and you continue to drive and get a DUI, that's going to be a problem, and it could lead to your removal.
All right. Bottom line, you need a lawyer. Second case, Jenny became a permanent resident when she was 13 through her parents, who are still permanent residents. Jenny registered to vote and voted in the general election in 2004. Can Jenny become a U.S. citizen? What is the conflict in this?
Well, she voted, and she's not a U.S. citizen. You can only vote if you're a U.S. citizen.
That's what I was asking. I was going to ask, but don't they ask you that when you register?
Well, I've had this come up in my practice. I mean, especially if you're here as a child, you're young, you maybe have not really fully grasped the fact that you're not a citizen, and people register to vote and they vote, and it's very inadvertent. It's very easy to register.
Right.
You just sign, and and
I got excited there for a minute. I thought I was going to be able to vote, but not yet.
So this is deportable. This woman can be deported from the United States for voting in an election. She actually registered and voted.
When she's not supposed to.
When she's not supposed to. And so the best way to approach this is to try to take this on head on, and that is when you go into citizenship, you have to tell them this is what happened. You have to lay out the case, how this was inadvertent, how you didn't mean to do it, and how it was the only time, and all of these factors, so that you can have, similar to the previous case with the criminal case, is that so that you can have them review this and say, okay, well, we're going to let this go and you can become a U.S. citizen.
So how does that work? Ignorance of the law is no excuse, but it happens when we don't know. So say, for example, I didn't know and I registered and I voted. Do they excuse that?
Well, I don't say that they would just give out a blanket excuse for that, but they are looking at that, looking at the circumstances.
Right.
You know, if you're, like I said, if you're here when you're, for many years when you're young, a lot of times you don't realize that.
Okay, case number 3, Darlene was petitioned by an employer. When her priority date became current, in 2007, she applied for adjustment of status. The visa numbers retrogressed, so she was not given permanent residency until 2010, at which time she no longer worked for a sponsoring employer. Can she still become a U.S. citizen?
Now, this raises a different issue. Now, before we were talking about criminal problems, but now we're talking about what happens when you get your permanent residency by mistake or through fraud. Well, in this case, this person became a permanent resident, although they really shouldn't have, because at the time they weren't no longer working for that person that was sponsoring them. So had the government looked at the case again, they looked at the case in 2007, but in 2010, had they asked for more documents, had they said,
then they would have known.
They would have known and they would have denied, but instead they just went ahead and approved the case. Well, this is a real problem, and this again is something that has to be addressed at some point. Now, these people eventually will either be, if they apply for citizenship, what always happens is the officer is going to ask you, are you still working for that employer?
Right.
Did you work for that employer after you got your green card? And so that's when it immediately comes up. So again, this is one of these situations where this will be put to a review panel to determine whether or not they want an NTA issued in this case.
What's an NTA?
A notice to appear. That is whether they're going to put the person in removal proceedings.
Okay.
Now, unlike the previous category where if they decide not to put you in removal proceedings, they're going to go ahead and adjudicate the M400 application, become a citizen. In this category of cases, they may not issue an NTA, but they may still deny your naturalization because they don't believe you legally obtained your permanent residence.
Yeah, so there's a fraud question in this. They might think that it was,
Although it's not your fraud, it's not the fraud necessarily that you committed, it's just that the government didn't really do all they were supposed to do, and so you inadvertently received permanent residency.
And also, bottom line, get a lawyer. And also, once you get an NTA, obviously you need to talk to a lawyer because they know more than we do and they can give us our options. That's the number to call on the screen if you want to schedule your appointment to see face-to-face Dr. Attorney Richard Lowe or get his autograph. Thank you so much. Merry Christmas and more power to you.
Merry Christmas to you.
Magbabalik pa ang Kababayan LA. Don't go away.